that they forget that the tape recorder is there, or you're writing notes, which I almost never do.
Hmm.
Uh, and they're, of course, aware of the interview in the beginning, but by the time the entree comes around, and then by the time dessert is there, and then you always ask for dessert and coffee because.
Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, host of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Arts and Culture podcast. If you haven't, please take a second to rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please make sure you're following us on Spotify or Apple. And did you know we have a YouTube channel? Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really means a lot. You can actually see a lot of our video episodes on YouTube. And if you don't want to listen to any ads that are going to happen throughout the episode, even though I love all of our sponsors, of course, you can listen to our ad-free episodes on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And right now, you can get 1 week for free to see all of the ad-free episodes. And all of those episodes are also video episodes. So you can get to watch me, the guest, and you can also listen to all of Mary's True Crime and Academia episodes ad-free. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really excited. I love my gay and lesbian review adjacent guests. So first, there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine. It's the gossip issue. It has one of my favorite martyrs of the Victorian period, Oscar Wilde, holding a sunflower on the cover. So that's exciting. And one of the contributors to that issue and a summer issue is Frank Rizzo, who is my esteemed guest here tonight, or whenever you're listening to this. Hi, Frank. Nice to talk with you.
Hello, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's always fun to talk about the magazine. It's a great magazine.
Yes, yes. So, well, first, how long have you known about the Gay and Lesbian Review?
Well, actually, my husband subscribed to it. He was the one who found it.
Hmm.
And then we started reading it and we started sharing it with other of our friends. And we
Hmm.
actually gifted the magazine to some of our friends because it's the type of thing, it's not like the old days where you could go to a magazine store or a
Hmm.
newsstand and discover it on your own. It's really word of mouth to a great extent. And it's one that, I'm eager to share and tell other people about.
Yes, yes. No, I feel the same way. So like what I first want to know is you're a theater critic, like journalist, longtime contributor to Variety magazine. So like when did your theater critic experience begin? Like
Well, I
how did
grew up,
that
well, I
begin?
grew up in a small middle class town in Massachusetts, and I was always interested in journalism, and I was always interested in the theater. And I
Mm.
also happened to be gay, which really was not a factor then. So I went to a school that had a wonderful theater department and a wonderful journalism department, which is at the University of Arizona.
Mm.
Then you work my way up into, from small newspapers to medium newspapers to larger newspapers. The main one I worked for most of my career was the Hartford Courant, where I was the arts and entertainment writer. Now, there I was a journalist, and as a journalist, I had three roles. One is the feature writer,
Mm.
interviews celebrities. One was the critic, reviewing shows. And the third one, which really didn't get, there's not a lot of us out there doing really hard arts reporting. So during the NEA crisis of the early 90s, I covered that. I covered a lot of serious issues in the arts, the ups and downs, the financial struggles. I treated covering theater as if I was covering sports or politics. It's not
Mm.
just putting stuff, it's making people engaged with what's out there.
Yeah. So what
And then
has
go
no,
ahead.
no. Well, what has your experience been? Like you said that you were doing features and interviews. There's a lot of like conversations right now about how celebrity culture, um, like that it can be really tough to get that organic interview in this current social media day and age where um everyone really wants that, not even just clickbait title, but now they want just like a 10-second 15-second, like something that can go viral. Like how do you feel the even place of an interviewer has just shifted since you first entered the field?
It's shifted completely, Andrew. When, of course, I got a lot of major interviews during my career. Really, the biggest stars and celebrities, but they were significant interviews. They were long interviews. They were over dinner, spending time with them. And the reason I got them is because of the publication. I worked for a major newspaper that was syndicated around the country. So when I worked for the smaller or the medium newspapers, I got some of that. So it's all, relative, and I understood that. But now everyone is I don't want to call them journalists, but they're influencer, and they have opinions, and some of them are brilliant. They really are. I don't want to put down social media writers, but some of
Mhm.
them are just, fake. God, they're probably AI. Uh,
Mhm.
and some are just, TikTok types of things. But there's some really good writing, good people out there writing good things. But the trick is to find them, and to that's why publications like the Gay and Lesbian Literary Review. This is, one of the vehicles that we learn about different things, and that's what's out there. But it's a different world. There's not that theater hard news theater reporting. The New York Times does it. The Washington Post does it. The Chicago Tribune used to do it. They don't do it as well, and that's pretty much it, Andrew. And there's magazines. New York Magazine, Vanity Fair has serious pieces, but all of this is sporadic. There's not that go-to place,
Mhm.
that person that's interested in theater, and especially LGBTQ issues, or arts and entertainment, go to, unless they go directly to a magazine like the Gay and Lesbian Journal Literary Review, or other publications, whether it be The Advocate, Out. I write for a Connecticut gay and lesbian magazine called Voice.
Mhm.
That's very good, and that's it's a different word, and it's a harder one. It's both harder and easier because I had to work my way up, but I think an entrepreneurial journalist, an LGBT writer who has that passion in writing about theater and about gay and lesbian issues can create their own niche if they're entrepreneurial.
Mhm. Well, that's even how I feel about my podcast now going on
Perfect example.
4 years is like how I first had to seek out interviews before I had like a wonderful sponsor like the Gay and Lesbian Review, or my other sponsor is Broadview Press, which is an independent academic publisher. And like I was cold calling just authors I loved, or I was cold calling actors. But then eventually now people are emailing me to pitch their
Mhm.
projects to me to be interviewed. So it is interesting to see that shift, but like you have to be ready for the doors to close multiple times. You have to really like, even because I share so many clips on social media, you have to be ready for like, um, just troll comments once in a while. It doesn't affect me now, but it really is not the easiest because journalists, I feel now, um, people want to know who the journalist is, which I feel like when you first came up, that wasn't exactly like you weren't supposed to really put your name out
That's
there.
exactly right. Especially when you are doing reporting, it's irrelevant who you are. It's
Mhm.
it's the facts. However, in feature writing, especially the profiles, you do have a personal relationship, for those special interviews. Not every single one, but spending time with an Austin Pendleton or Sam Waterston and
Mm,
Richard Kiley and Elliot Good, and you're spending time with these people, and they open up to you, and you're sort of drawing them out, and it's a personal relationship. Sometimes you're in the story. I try not to be, but sometimes it calls for it. Uh,
mm,
but even if I'm not in the story, the writing, you have a sense, is personal, and
mm.
you have a feeling that there's that sensitivity in the perceptions that you're bringing to the reader.
Yeah, when I had Jesse Green here from the New York Times on the podcast, he talked about like how like it's rare, but he loves when he does those like dinner interviews or like I profiled, I think Audra McDonald is who he profiled, if I remember it right. But he's done a few of those profiles.
I'll tell you, Andrew, the secret in profile writing is breaking bread. If you can
Mm,
get them either over lunch, dinner, breakfast, there's something about sitting down and having a meal that they forget that the tape recorder is there, or you're writing notes, which I almost never do.
hmm
Uh, and they're, of course, aware of the interview in the beginning, but by the time the entree comes around, and then by the time dessert is there, and then you always ask for dessert and coffee because it extends the interview.
mm,
Um, it's a more personal thing because these people have done a zillion interviews. So you approach these interviews with, what can I bring to this interview that they haven't heard or they haven't been asked before?
mm.
And that's why I do a lot of homework before I do any interview.
Yes, yes. Well, do you know who Bruce Bozzi is?
Uh, no, I don't think so.
Okay. He's like just well, I know him from this podcast he does that he's like in New York City based um and he was interviewing Bette Midler and it was over lunch. So he has this whole concept of exactly what you're saying. He like brought it into the podcast space, but it was like conversations over lunch. I think he's had Anna Wintour. He's like very close friends with Sarah Jessica Parker and Andy Cohen. Um, and oh, he's a former Palm restaurant executive.
Uh,
Um,
that
so
helps.
I'm just looking right now. Variety in 2023 profiled him speaking about one of your, outlets.
Outlets.
So I think though, do you feel that the majority of the celebrities you've interviewed or public figures, I'll say,
Mhm.
um, do you feel like they really most of the time enjoy opening up that insight that they're going to hopefully get after they sit down or they have a conversation, or do they feel like this is just part of their publicity spiel that they have to go through?
Unless they know you, and I've interviewed people many times. I've been doing this for more than 40 years. So a lot of these celebrities and well-known people I've interviewed before, they know me. So there's that comfort level. But for the most part, when they sit down, it's just another interview. They don't know who you are necessarily. They maybe have a little bit of a briefing. So it's that first impression that's all important. And it's the signal, the question to them to let them know you know what you're doing, that you've done their homework. And if they can say, oh, I didn't know you knew that about me, or, oh, that's an interesting question, already they're more engaged and they slowly open up to you.
Mm,
So, and if there's anything that you can share, if, obviously I'm a gay man, if I know that I'm talking to an out gay man, then, or even not an out gay man, but obviously we won't be talking about that. Uh, that's a personal connection. If there's something that they're talking about that you relate to, or vice versa,
mm,
that always helps. But unlike I don't know the person that you referred to with Bette Midler, if that was he taped the entire meal and then put it up. For me, no, I don't want that because part of my specialty is I'm a writer. I craft things. I put things together. I take the very best
Hmm.
because sometimes the first 30 minutes, obviously you want to make an impression, but sometimes you're just chit-chatting. It's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. Then you ask them, oh, what about that? And then suddenly they open up and they tell you something extraordinary. And that's when you go deep. But I don't want the reader to listen to 20 minutes of whatever. Uh,
Hmm.
so I take it and then I craft a really, what I hope is an interesting feature story, an interesting interview that is compelling and that is a little bit different, a little bit deeper, and a little bit more engaging than just another celebrity interview asking the same thing over and over and over again. And that's hard. And that's, I think, the difference between, oh, anyone can interview anyone.
Hmm.
I have my iPhone and I can do it. Well, maybe you can, but I hope you're good. I hope you do
Hmm.
your homework. And I hope you go home and craft something that is really special and not just throw it up on social media.
I think that's all such great advice, Frank. And I also think that something that really excites me about like the job that I get to do is like I'm always coming at things more from just my PhD literary mind or even arts and culture, the way that I teach certain topics to my students in literature courses, that like it isn't a competitive element, in my opinion, about the podcast space even because like what one podcaster does with an interview is going to be very different than what I get out of that interview because I'm just really digging different into the craft approach of how I'm going to be asking questions. Like that's another thing is I do feel there's a lot of like egos that now get in the way with journal like I'll just put journalism in quotes, but that get in the way of like I'll call them like entertainment type reporters.
But unlike what I do as a journalist, a print journalist, as a podcaster, you are a vital element, and who you are and how you represent yourself and how you interview
Hmm.
is different than what I do. I don't have any podcast. I've done radio, I've done television on occasion. Uh, but you are a brand and you are a personality. And you have to craft yourself in a certain way. I, as a print journalist, I'm sort of, people don't know who I am,
Hmm.
but know that I'm there somehow, bringing out these, interesting aspects of these
Mhm.
people.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
so it's a little bit different, but in a way, there's a little bit of performance element in what you do, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, no, I take that with a pat on the back because I have a background in theater as well. So I do think that that helps
Helps.
with the
Yeah.
persona element, but also, like I love what you were saying about like the meandering. See, to me, the way that I use TikTok or Instagram is I like find those even from like what we're discussing right now, Frank, whatever
Mhm.
those like pressing um cutting, exciting, innovative, like, sound bites we have. That for me is where I would go to TikTok and post it or YouTube. Like,
Mhm.
it's like even though this conversation is going to be about an hour, like there will be clips from it that the general audience will gravitate towards.
And that's a great way to promote the podcast because you just give them a snippet. In a way, it's the version of the little blurb on page one telling you that there's a story on the cover of the features page in the entertainment section. You just get
Exactly.
a taste. You get the best quote. You get the best. Well, in my case, I work intimately with photographers. They're my ally, and because in terms of print media,
Have you heard me
gush and obsess over one of my favorite magazines. It's called the Gay and Lesbian Review, a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics. Yes, focusing on all things LGBTQ arts and culture. So from reviews like the new Daniel Craig film called Queer to musicals, theater, TV shows. The new January, February issue just was mailed to my house. Yes, I still get a physical copy of the magazine. There is a discussion about sodomy at the court of Louis the 14th, how Mark Twain was bottom shamed. Yeah, I know. A scandalous title. I'm really curious what that means. And just so many conversations that will have you doing a Google search to find either the book that's being reviewed, the TV show that's being talked about, the film that's being discussed. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. And they gave us an exclusive code. So all you ITBR listeners, make sure that you write down the code ITBR50. Go to glreview.org and you can get either the digital or print subscription for 50% off. Yes, 50% off. Use that code ITBR50. I hope you enjoy your reading. I'm sure you've heard me talk about my friend Christian Garcia's podcast, but if you haven't, you need to look up his podcast, That Old Gay Classic Cinema. It is on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And he looks at iconic classic films through a queer lens, which I just love. He's done Singing in the Rain, All About Eve, It's a Wonderful Life. Yes, that iconic holiday film. I'm curious to listen. I need to know what is so queer about It's a Wonderful Life. Dracula, The Sounds of Music, you name a classic film, he's probably done it. So go on over to his Instagram, That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Make sure you follow him and you'll stay up to date with all of his recent releases. I know you're going to love it.
The first thing the reader looks like, I learned this from Journalism 101. The first thing a reader looks is a picture. Second thing it looks like is the headline. The third thing the reader looks like is the first paragraph of your story. We have to make them, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to read the second paragraph of the story. So you have to be humble as a writer, knowing that they're not necessarily going to get to the end of that long feature unless you're damn good.
Yes, yes. Well, something that I'm so interested in asking you is like you're so well versed in the art forms of theater and film, just I'll say LGBTQ art in general, but mostly theater and film. And I'm curious, do you feel like these genres they're portraying LGBTQ life, specifically, like we can talk about gay male representation right now. Do you feel like one is doing a better job than the other, in your opinion, in current
Well,
day culture?
well, for my generation, from the 60s on, it was always theater was the only refuge. Well, maybe literature as well, but even literature was, sometimes challenging. I mean, yeah, you have something like, faggots and a few other, and thank God for anti-MAME. But other than that, not much in terms of film, and God knows very little, if anything, on television. Unless it's just a cheap gag. But the theater was where the LGBT community, in terms of their literary import, really felt that they had a home. And it's, obviously there was, Edward Albee, there was Terrence McNally, there was Tennessee Williams, of course. And at first it began with, veiled references. Then there were actually characters, and then there were actually issues. And in the 70s, everything exploded, and there was a lot more things going on. And then the AIDS crisis really upped the ante for everyone, knowing that, there was too much at stake. And the political LGBTQ writing emerged from the theater. And at that time, gradually, film very slowly, and to a lesser extent, television emerged with a few gay issue type movie of the week things like an early Frost. But I remember I went to a film junket for the movie Making Love, which is the first time a major motion picture, I think it was around late 80s perhaps, and it had the first male kiss. Of course, there were straight actors doing it, but I remember, but it was written by a gay man and in essence about himself, but it was fraught from the beginning. It was a failure, but well, it wasn't actually a very good film either. But it was always theater that was in the forefront. And then in the 80s and 90s, whether it be Larry Kramer with Normal Heart, Tony Kushner with Angels in America, this is where the action was. This is where the import was. And even musical theater, like La Cage aux Folles, was earth-shattering. Shattering, not because it dealt with drag or gay themes. It got the middle class, middle of the road, average American audience because it was a show about family. And for me, I don't think I left the theater in my life as moved as I was by that show and feeling this is, a game changer here. So sometimes it comes from the strangest places. Sometimes musical theater can do it as well.
Well, this is so interesting because I actually feel we're in an inverse right now of a funnel where, like, and no offense to who I hope to interview, Chad Biguelen or Beguelen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Chad Biguelen. Okay.
Sure.
Who did The Prom, The Wedding Singer, Elf. He just came out with
he's
novel.
Great.
Yeah, he
I
wrote a
love
novel. Oh, good. He has a novel called Showmance. And
I have to check it out.
Oh, good. Well, shout out, Chad. But like I feel that The Prom, excellent, right? Like really talked to like the young adult queer community. But now on Broadway, I feel that it's really hard to see queer narratives. But off Broadway, I mean, there is the musical, The Big Gay Jamboree. So like I feel like off Broadway has like more of like what you're talking about, those Broadway 60s, 70s experimental.
Well, there's always been those type of campy shows. What I would say the difference in terms of LGBT theater stories now is that they moved away from the coming out stories to the wide variety of gay lesbian stories that are out there. But and a lot of them are one-person shows. They're very personal. You can't swing a gay guy without hitting a one-person show off Broadway talking about their personal stories. But now we're also making room for other people's personal stories, whether it be the Asian American community, whether it be the Black Lives Matter community, whether it be the women's issues. I think LGBTQ has broken the door down, at least opened the locks or whatever cheesy metaphor you want to go, and said that there's a place for all these personal stories for people who have been marginalized. And some are terrific, some are not very good. It's like, well, save it for your therapist. But some are beautifully crafted, but there's more of it because the door is open for a lot more of these stories. I'm happy that they've moved away from the coming out stories. But guess what? Now the trans community has their stories. And in a way, it reminds me of our stories in the 90s, where it's all about coming to terms. And I've a feeling in 10 years, we'll be seeing a wide variety of trans stories that are not just about coming to terms of who they are, but what their lives are like, what their daily lives are like. That there are so many different stories. So I'm excited about the door being opened. I always look for the best ones.
Absolutely. Well, and someone I had on the podcast, his name is Thomas Wall. I don't know if you know his work, but it's called Hard to Imagine. It was like this book all about mostly like the gay adult cinema industry
Hmm.
or just like homoerotic art and visuals, I should
Hmm.
say. But something I got to talking with him is um like he was recalling in like the 1970s how these theaters in Times Square were all over the place. Like there was like a huge like stranglehold on the porn cinema community when it came to gay men, but like what you're saying is when it came to mainstream film, that did not
Hmm.
exist.
But it's so interesting in the gay culture from the 60s, 70s, and 80s and how that emerged. And I'm hoping to pitch a story. I already wrote it for another magazine, but there was a magazine, I have a copy right here. It's After Dark magazine.
Mm,
And what's interesting about After Dark magazine is that it began publishing in, I think, 69 and it stopped in 82. Well, that's the bookends from Stonewall to AIDS.
mm,
And it was sort of this cultural phenomenon where the doors were open for the LGBT community. And it was through the 70s, one big party.
mm,
And this magazine celebrated it, but it wasn't technically a gay magazine. It
mm,
was an entertainment magazine, but it was clear to any LGBTQ person that this was for them. But you could put
mm,
it on your coffee table, and mother and father would see Angela Lansbury or an interview with Rudolph Nureyev or someone like that. But it was more than that. But there was so many other things going on culturally with the downtown performance artists in the 80s. And you could just see the evolution of culture and the LGBT community emerging and having a greater influence everywhere, including finally television and film.
mm. Well, do you feel like there's kind of a return to like I just keep seeing on TikTok the like Russian Turkish bathhouse on Wall Street is like having all of these like buff young men promoting about like okay man, this is like your bonding time to like embrace your natural self and come to the bathhouse, and I'm like kind of wondering if
This
we're
is
like there's
straight.
this.
This is the
Well,
straight
not
impulse, right?
really. Well, they don't really specify the sexuality. I mean, it's kind of ambiguous, I would say. I would say there's definitely like appealing to a queer male audience. Um, but
That's it.
they're not like outwardly saying that this is like cruising, right? But I do kind of wonder if there's like a nostalgia appetite now, almost for like, oh, what would it have been like if we were in the 70s? And like they're trying to replicate certain elements of that. I don't know if you see that happening.
Yeah, I do see that. I think Generation Z and millennials sort of have this, feeling, this retro feeling of
Mhm.
what they miss, especially Generation Z, because they were the generation that really was AIDS was not a factor in their growing up, and
Mhm.
even to a lesser extent, millennials. Then it gets, kind of fuzzier beyond that. And there's this awareness of LGBTQ history. And it reminds me of myself looking back at the 1920s, thinking, oh man, I wish I was in the 20s. There looks, Harlem Renaissance and, oh, the coast of Côte d'Antibes with Hemingway and Fitzgerald. I think there's a bit of that, and I welcome that because it's certainly not taught in the schools. And we have a very rich history now. Before it was, in the shadows or marginalized, but now it's a rich history. Another book. I mean, there's a book out, a terrific book. Ethan Mordden, great theater writer, Gays on Broadway.
Oh, okay. This is very recent, right, Frank?
It's very recent. It's about
Okay.
6 months or so. He's
Mm.
a terrific writer, but there's stuff there to learn about, discover, and it's so much fun and a discovery to go. I didn't know that. What my story for the LGBTQ, Gay and Lesbian Literary
Mm.
Review on the Wyndham, oh God, Wyndham Campbell
Mm.
story. I didn't know these people, and when I learned them, I was so fascinated, and I realized they were so well connected. I think it'd make a great mini series.
Yeah.
These
Oh, please
these
tell our listeners, Frank, like who are these men?
Well, Donald Wyndham and Sandy Campbell were gay men. They met in the early 40s and they became partners, lovers. And they were sort of on the margins of every literary gay thing that was happening. They were close friends, if not the closest friends of Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote.
Oh.
There's another book I have here called Intimate Companions, and it's
Ooh.
about the gay painters and choreographers and literary types and
Oh.
playwrights of the 50s and 60s. And
Mm.
these two guys were at the center of it. And yeah, one was, yes, an actor, but he sort of gave it up. One was a writer, a good writer, but not a great writer. But they knew everyone, and everyone knew them. And their story on, their intimate inside insights of
Mm.
who these people were from an LGBT perspective, their letters that they shared, the stories that they shared, were just fascinating.
Mm. Well, you're reminding me of anytime I hear Truman Capote, I just think, well, um, the FX show, and every time he says his swans, I joke with my boyfriend because my boyfriend, I'll be like making coffee and he's like, "Hello, my swans." Like it's just such Truman
Uh,
Capote, like is a riot.
Trimming is a gift that keeps on giving,
That
time
is
and again.
very
Uh,
true. But
there's
also,
good,
I
yeah,
interviewed Felice Picano and he worked at Rizzoli bookstore and he had
uh,
stories about Truman
yeah.
Capote.
Well,
So
it's these people
fascinating.
that actually are on the margins, these people that have anecdotes, because these icons, whether it be
Hmm.
Capote or Tennessee Williams or Gore Vidal, they have their own narrative that they want to present. But these intimates tell you so much more about who these people really were. And often it's a much more complicated and sometimes unflattering, but sometimes, always fascinating. And it shows you that these people were complex just like we are.
Yes. Did you have a chance to read Lawrence Lemer's Capote Swans?
No, I
Okay.
haven't. I have not read it.
Okay. Well, I
But
had him on the podcast, so you can
I heard
listen.
wonderful.
Instead, you can listen to my interview with him. But no,
Okay.
it's fascinating because, like, what you're saying is you would think, oh, this glitz glamour, like all the women he surrounds himself, and you know, Jackie Kennedy and like just these high profile women on Fifth Avenue, that it must have been such a glorious, like glamorous life. But instead he's almost the court jester for these women, and it's like if he makes one wrong move he's ousted. So actually um they're kind of like just seeing him as their side piece entertainment and the gay jester.
And in a way, that has been the role of the
Mm.
LGBT artists over the years. Whether it be literally the jester of the king, or the sidekick in the movies, and often it's presented in a very flamboyant way. But even the most straight environment can have a gay element because it's safe.
Are
Because
you
it's either,
saying Andy Cohen and the Real Housewives is our modern day Truman Capote?
oh, please, I wouldn't dignify that comparison.
Oh,
And he's a lot of fun, but literary he ain't.
uh-oh.
Well,
Well,
there goes my interview with him.
no, no, I know. I mean, I want to interview him, but I like his Sirius XM show because he'll talk about like literature and like politics, but the way that he's shown to the mainstream is not that cutting edge nuanced conversation. But to me, that's the same way like Paris Hilton is shown. Like she has all this ingenuity and innovative conversation about artificial intelligence that I heard her be interviewed about, but no one sees her in that light. And I sometimes just wonder, like, why do celebrities have to be palpable in, like, sometimes when I think to myself, Frank, oh, wouldn't it just be wonderful if the public all knew my name? And then another part of me is like, no, because you'd probably have to sell part of yourself and only be digestible to certain people with certain conversations. Like you kind of do dilute yourself sometimes. I mean,
You do. And that's the
I don't
beauty of
know.
being a print journalist is you don't have to be the face of things, even though I did TV and radio for quite a long time. Uh, but yeah, but as you create a career, you really have to be careful of what how you I hate to use the word branding, but how you present yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, and yes, there might be an opportunity to play the Andy Cohen clown. And I don't mean that I guess I do mean that in a disparaging way, but not completely. But because he does bring a lot of personalities and a lot of information to his show, but he does it in a way that would not be the way I would do it. But that's fine. We all have a different ways. But he's sort of stuck with that. For him to suddenly be the intellect is going to be quite the leap.
Yeah.
But I think Paris Hilton, there's been enough time between the young Paris Hilton and the not the middle-aged Paris Hilton, but maybe she is middle-aged, but the much older Paris
Mm.
Hilton. And I think to a different generation that does not know the past Paris Hilton can take her seriously or take her more seriously, anyways, than just dismiss her as this little flibbity gibbet.
Yeah, Flippity Gibbet. I love that. But I also just feel like that's the way, like, how have you felt that the different generations of gay men, like, we'll get into like our theater and politics or film and politics, but like, I do feel like now is a really interesting time because there's like a linking of the generations that I don't really think has been done in the way like even us having a conversation, Frank, like the way that you can have there was just so much lost from the AIDS epidemic, not
Yeah,
me just studying it. I wasn't there and alive, but that like I always just wonder what would that generation have brought to bear in terms of conversations and like mentoring the younger generation and like
I,
I
I
wonder
think
like where that mentorship is right now.
As an English professor, I would have no idea where to begin with books to assign to my students. So I absolutely love Broadview Press, who is celebrating their 40th anniversary. Broadview Press, they publish classic works of literature, academic, humanities books. I've read so many of their books, and I've always loved whatever conversations being discussed, from the philosophy of sport, indigenous philosophy and Native American culture, vampire literature. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, new edition that just came out just in time for Wicked fandom. Folk and fairy tales. My students love the different Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood fairy tales that we discussed. They always have a really exciting collection. So head on over right now to broadviewpress.com. Use the exclusive code that they gave us, Ivory Tower, for 20% off all of your orders. I hope you enjoy your reading, and please let me know and DM me with the books that you're getting from Broadview Press, because I'd love to share it with Dylan from Broadview Press, who always is curious to see what the Ivory Tower Boiler Room community is purchasing. So enjoy your reading, and I hope you discover even more exciting humanities works.
Yeah, I think probably for the millennials, people growing up and becoming of age in the late 90s and the aughts miss that mentoring because we've lost so many great people, and there wasn't that mentoring. But now I think it's a lot different. I think those of us who survived, but also gay men and women much younger than I, but not as young as the Generation Z, can establish that mentoring relationship. I have quite a few friends who are in their 20s and 30s, not as many as my peers, but more than I thought I would at this point, because there are a lot of LGBT folk that really are curious and want don't want to be told how to do things, but want to learn and get advice, and whether they take it or not, but also to learn the history. But I don't expect every Generation Z, 19-year-old to suddenly want to embrace gay history. I think it just comes as you get older and you become more curious and want to just become more worldly and I don't want to say cosmopolitan, but just more curious about the world around you.
Yeah. Well, someone who like is a landmark as a film gay critic, was Vito Russo.
Oh, yes.
And like you talk a lot about Vito Russo in your Gay and Lesbian Review summer article, all about making of the longtime companion, and that he has this whole. Can you like just explain to everyone out there? I love how you describe his view about political correctness. If you remember, like he has just this very like cutting way of describing that like almost privileged gay men shouldn't be erased from conversation.
Yeah, Vito is, God, what a loss, not having Vito. I would have loved to have seen what he wrote, because he literally wrote the book on, LGBT community in film. But he was also, had contrary opinions from the norm. And I think that's healthy in anything. I think it's always good to question ourselves. That's what I try to do in the larger pieces. Are we seeing too much of this? Are these the stories that, do we always have to have these stories? I mean, the most interesting gay stories to me are the ones that aren't, necessarily gay, that suddenly you find someone's personal story that and he happens to be gay, but it's not hitting you over the head. I think also the Black Lives Matter movement, to get myself in trouble here, when the doors started opening to plays and theaters welcoming their stories, there was so much anger and there was so much teaching that they forgot that the audience was there to wanting to see some art at the same time. So there were a lot of, and this came right after the pandemic, and audiences were looking for joy, and instead they were getting, this. And that's all settled down, and now there's some wonderful writing emerging. But these things come in phases, and groups of people, types of people, tell their stories in different ways and grow in different ways. And I'm just here for the ride, but I'm also looking for art at the same time, and
Well,
entertainment too.
yeah. Well, what are you going to make of what is supposed to be maybe one of our best 2025 queer films is Queer by Luca Guadagnino, right?
I'm looking forward to that.
Daniel
Again,
Craig is naked, apparently. That's
yes, and I'll never say no to a naked Daniel Craig. And actually, this brings up an interesting point: the whole thing about casting straight men in gay roles.
Mhm.
I think that's there's not a one straight answer to that. The answer is it depends. It depends on the artist. It depends on what they bring to the table. It depends if others are given the opportunity in other
Mhm.
vehicles to be represented and to have a shot at the apple or a bite at the apple.
Mhm.
But yeah, the director is fascinating. The story is interesting. Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Next to Wicked, it's the my
Oh,
favorite.
well, yes. I mean, I'm taking a group to see Wicked, so I had
By the way,
Gregory.
the original author is Gregory Maguire, and
Oh, he's
out.
been here. Yes, yes.
Oh, he's isn't he wonderful?
He's
I've
so
interviewed him.
kind. I just reached out to him again,
Oh,
actually.
he's a
Yeah.
sweetheart, and I've interviewed him in his home in Concord, Massachusetts, and
Oh,
several times.
wait, with the
And
iconic clock, because his like clock was going off. I think he has
really,
this like very antique
yeah,
clock that
it's a
just chimes.
very colonial home.
Yeah. He likes
So
to go swimming. I know that about him.
yeah, really, he does.
No, it's wonderful. He's so kind.
Yeah.
But that's what I just love is like the infectious nature of Gregory Maguire and like the way that he explores queerness through fantasy, like the way the marginalized person, like Alphaba, becomes a
Right.
symbol for
I did
queerness.
a story for another magazine talking to him about he, in a way, not apologize, but he realized that he didn't represent the LGBTQ community in his writing for a lot of what he's done.
Mm,
That we as gay people see ourselves in characters like Elphaba, but it was only in his later novels that there's actually gay characters in his novel. And the latest trilogy is terrific. It has
mm.
literally gender changing characters. So I think he's making up for it.
Oh, the
But
Maricore trilogy?
yes, it's
Okay.
wonderful.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
and but Wicked, yes, we bring and we do this in, we've always done this as gay men and women. We see, even though these characters are not gay, whether it be Elphaba or Auntie Mame,
Yes.
whether, there's something in these people, these characters' spirit that whether they're survivors or free spirits or fighters or writers of wrong. There's something for us to identify. That's why we've embraced those characters when we didn't have characters of our own. And I think that has made our gay culture all the richer because it's not just about us, it's about our spirit.
I love that to think about the spirit of the gay community or the queer community. That's powerful.
Because of
Wait,
its
yeah.
inclusiveness, because of its generosity, because
Mhm.
not that everyone's inclusive, we all have our failings, but the idea of of kindness and sex, quite
Mhm.
frankly.
Well, that's
I
what I was going to ask you. It's like, right, what's more sensational than sex? No, but I do think that, like, I'm sure you've just seen there was a book called, is it Hard Times about theater? There's the one that like looks at the 70s and like sexual topics of like a Oh Calcutta or
Mhm.
Applause or there were so many,
Yeah.
but I mean, like the Full Monty is more recent in history, but still similar theme. Do you feel like that sex and gay male categorization, whether it be theater and then film, even like Brokeback Mountain, a lot of it was
Mhm.
like, oh, there's like, bareback sex represented. Do you think that sensationalism was done to like ostracize the gay male community from like a straight male perspective, or like they just weren't seeing
It
gay
might
men
have
as
it
360 degrees?
it might have done that in the beginning, but I think because sex is important to the LGBT community, and we're perhaps less shy about talking about it and dealing with it than our straight brethren and sisters, if brethren is exclusively male. Um, and I think because of that, sex in general is now more of an open topic for everyone.
Mhm.
And so now, perhaps not during the AIDS epidemic, where sex was seen as death, but at the turn of the millennium, I think it changed, and it broke down some doors and loosened things up a bit. And sex is a great topic for literature and for movies and for TV. It's sex is who we are and part of our life. And it'd be nice to think that the LGBT community had a small part of making it more available to all of us.
Yes, yes. Well, and I like just am thinking, didn't Luca Guadagnino, didn't he do Call Me by Your Name, or is that a different
Yes,
director?
I think he did,
Okay.
and that's a beautiful film. It's actually one of my favorites,
No, yeah, it's so well done.
mainly because it's a subtlety, mainly
Hmm.
because it's incredibly sexy and sensual, but it's so, I want to say, European almost, because I think an American traditional director, even though it was Ivory who did the script, would hit you over the head, but I just love the nuance of that film and the performances,
Yes,
and of
yes.
course Timothy.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, like as we're, wrapping up, I'm just curious, like what are you excited? I know you're like continuing to like pitch ideas to like seeing certain theater performances for Variety, Gay and Lesbian review ideas you have. Like, what are you eager to work on, Frank, in the upcoming months?
Well, I think After Dark is 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 a fascinating subject because of that time period where it existed. It was the chronicle for gay arts and culture for that magic period where it
Mm,
was one big gay party because Stonewall opened the doors and gay liberation happened.
mm,
And the disco era and the 70s and 70s fashion and liberation would work, with the other political movements, women's liberation and all
mm,
of that. There was so much excitement, so much potential, until Ronald Reagan stuck a wooden, stake in the heart of hope.
mm,
So this magazine chronicled. So I'd like to write something about that, and another character that I love that I'm just recently, I have the books. It's Patrick Dennis. He wrote Little Me. He
mm,
wrote First Lady. Of course, he wrote Auntie Mame. But what an interesting character he was from a literary point of view, from a gay point of view, from a bisexual point of view,
mhm.
from a camp point of view, from what his life was all about. I think that's an interesting story. Actually, I think it would make a wonderful stage play or a movie or something. The real
Mm,
Auntie Mame, actually, he was Auntie Mame himself. So there's, like, Andrew, there's so many good stories
mhm.
that to be written, and so many good characters, and so many good shows on Broadway. I just saw Romeo and Juliet
Oh,
and Sunset Boulevard, and Our Town with Jim Parsons. He's very good. The production's okay, but he's very very good in it. And for just sheer fun and excitement, not necessarily Shakespearean purity. I think a young audience will just love Romeo and Juliet. Older
yes.
folk, probably not so much. And yes, this production, it's not a tragedy. It's sad, but it's not a tragedy. It takes away the epicness of it. But man, Andrew, 90% of that audience was under 40, and I would say 60% was under 30. That's something
Wow.
I've never seen in a theater
No.
where I'm old and sometimes I'm the youngest one there. So that's exciting.
Yes. Oh, this is all, well, very exciting. And I'm so happy that, everyone out there can read your articles in the Gay and Lesbian Review. So glreview.org, they can use our promo code ITBR50 for 50% off their subscription. So just for everyone to use it out there. Yeah.
And one more plug for me, even
Yeah.
though I don't blog, I put all the stuff that I write on showriz.com,
Oh, okay.
SHOW Riz, RIZ, and I'm one letter away from being the word of the year this year,
Oh,
Riz, RIZZ, but I just missed that. But I put all my variety and New York Times pieces and others, and of course, link the Gay and Lesbian review stories in and a lot of other stuff. So
oh, good.
if you,
I'll link to
great,
showriz.com.
great.
And then if are you on social media, Frank, or you don't have to
I'm
be?
just I'm just on Facebook and Twitter. Again,
Okay.
shows is my handle. Um, I'm just really busy, and I
Yeah.
know how much time to be a really committed social media presence entails. And right now, as I get older, I want to do more traveling, and the writing that I do want to do, I want to make sure it's very, very special. That's why I love writing for Gay and Lesbian Literary Review.
Oh, good, good. Wait, so what is the handle again for your Facebook?
Showriz at
Showriz.
X or Twitter,
Okay, okay, okay. And
any
RIZZ.
one Z,
No,
one
one
Z,
Z, RIZ.
Showriz like showbiz.
I
Oh, it
love
was
it.
a name I thought years ago, and I sort of regret it, but I'm stuck with it. So there
No,
you go.
it works well. And now I mean Riz in the Gen Z lingo is charisma. So you
I
were
just
ahead of the curve.
I just looked into that. At least they don't associate with me with the Jerky Boys.
I don't know that reference. What are the Jerky
Um,
Boys?
it's the generation between um, more millennial. It's a move. I don't want to get it's so stupid. So
Okay, I'll look it up later. But
okay,
thank you so much, Frank, and thanks
oh,
to
this was fun,
everyone.
Andrew.
Yes, yeah.
Anytime.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, thanks to everyone listening. And head on down to the links to get, all things Frank Rizzo. Okay, bye everyone out there.
Bye.